afternoon, good evening. To those of you on YouTube and TikTok platforms, we thank the Most High even for you. This is Biblical Marriage Wednesday. Yes. And we thank God for you. Let us pray, O most holy Sanini Nanini. Help us to understand why we go through and how and examples of things that people have went through in their marriages, whether they be poly or mono. We thank you for all that you've done. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your grace, that we might live in this world together, that we might raise families, that we might have a love that cannot be separated. Yes, there's things that are going to happen, and we thank you that we can come out even unscathed. And we thank you for all things. Yes. Oh, yes. Biblical Marriage Wednesday. We coming from Genesis chapter 25. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife. 40 years old. How old was Rebekah? I have no idea. The Bible, I don't see where the Bible has any indication of how old Rebekah was. Now, she was the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padanaram, the sister of Laban, the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife. Man, you got to pray for your wife. Pray for yourself while you're praying for your wife, especially if she's barren. She says he prayed for a while because she was barren. Why was she barren? We don't know. It could have been him, and it could have been her. We don't know. Do not accuse, because you don't know unless you go to a clinic somewhere to test, your count, your egg count, or whatever. And how come these things are so? You might be too acidic, or you might be too alkaline, that these things won't even take part or take into a child like we would have these days. Now, the I am was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. In other words, the I am prayed. We don't have the time span of what happened. We know that he was 40 years old, wise enough to know that something's wrong, and I got to call on my God. That's what it is. I have to call on my God. So he did. And they had two children. We know Esau and Jacob. We know that story, but that's not where we're going to go. Okay, now here we go again. Now, men going to be looking at your wife just as Abram and Sarah. It says in verse 10 of Genesis chapter 26 and verse 10, and we're going to go down. And Abimelech says, what is it that thou hast done unto us? In other words, Abimelech took Rebekah, his wife. She was beautiful. I mean, you have his father's wife was beautiful, Sarai, and then you have Rebekah, another beautiful black woman. Yes. What is this that thou hast done unto us? For one of the people who might lightly have lain with thy wife, that thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. Now, he said, this is my sister. Apparently, yes, it was. In so many words. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying that he that touches this man's wife shall surely be put to death. Because what? The I am was on the side of Isaac. And Isaac sowed in that land and received the same year 100-fold. And the I am blessed him. Why? Because he was part of what's about to come to pass. Now, let's go to Genesis chapter 28. This is a short story about him and praying for your wife. Okay, chapter 28 of Genesis. Now we're going to go through verse 1. And so we're going to say 28. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him, and charged him and said unto him, thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. In other words, you're going to take a daughter of those who I tell you to. Do not go this way as your brother Esau. Esau, he was just headstrong. Obedience is better than sacrifice in this case. And Esau did what he felt like he should do. What about the facts? The fact is, your father told you not to do this, but yet you did it anyway. You knew you had the birthright, but yet you gave it away anyway. That's something that really we don't understand the whole depth of it. Verse 2. Arise, go to Padanaram, to the house of Bethuel. There you go again. Thy mother's father, and take thee a wife. He went on his kinfolks, his cousins, okay? From thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother, okay? Now that's Rebekah's brother. Now he's saying and God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people. And give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee, and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abram. Now these things we know. He knew the type of class of women that his brother Laban had put forth, how he trains them, how they were groomed to be who they are. Nice, feminine, wife material women. Now, man, God always addresses you in the Bible. Never mind about the rest. He addresses you. He tells you to watch out for the promiscuous woman. He tells you to find a wife. If you find a wife, you find a good thing. Yes, God tells you, you are made after the image of God. The woman is made after the image of you, and therefore she is your helpmate, that she might reproduce you. Yes, whether it be a man or a woman, still the cycle must go on. Now, I don't care how the naysayers or how these rebellious men and women get to the point where they always, these are doctrines of devils. Remember the thing where we said that God does not want you to have leaven on the Sabbath days, because a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Watch. These women will turn you. These women will cause you to be miserable all your life. Oh, don't I know? They will cause you to be miserable because of the way they think, the way they've been raised. So here we go again. Watch. Even the Akosa tribe. I've watched Johnny John on YouTube, and she shows a depiction of the Akosa tribe, how the man goes and he sees a woman of his tribe and she's walking. She might have her own apartment or whatever, but she will not buy a house. The traditional Akosas. Now, they would sit up there, they would go get the house, he would ask her to marry him, and she might agree. And so what he does, he goes back to his father's land, builds, fix him up a house and get it ready and everything. They don't know when he's coming. She has agreed. So his uncles and everything go back and meet him, his family and all this, and they agree on a bride price. And next thing you know, after he got the house built, he comes and pops up. Boom! But she's ready. She's ready because she knows her tradition. She's been raised in that tradition. And we're going to stop it right there. If you want for more on that, go to Johnny John's playlist and you will find out the depth in that. Okay? Now, it says now, he says in verse 4, okay, and give thee blessing of Abraham to thee, and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land therein. Thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. And Isaac sent away Jacob, and he went to Padanaram to Laban his son. Now this is where we get into, he was involuntarily put into what we would call polymarriage. In other words, he had multiple wives. Multiple wives is nothing new in the earth, because it started soon after Adam and Eve had conceived, because Cain, even he married his sisters. He married more than one, because we don't see, you have to go in the book of Jasher, you have to go in the book of Jubilees, and you will see that Adam and Eve had sons, they had daughters after they had Cain and Abel. Daughters were given to them, and they were able to reproduce, and they grew up. Yes, they had the weight or whatever, but they didn't think like we think. Now, Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac, he went and tried to, in other words, he's trying to sacrifice. Obedience is better than sacrifice. He went and married Ishmael, Matala, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. Still, that's not what, he has lost his birthright. He's despised by the Most High because he counted it as nothing. Even he should have been at the point of death. The Most High would have saved him if he would have had any type of faith. Okay? Now, in that narrative. Now, Jacob went forth from Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place, and there tarried all night because of the sun. Now, this is what God had blessed him, because he received the promise. Now, therefore, here he goes. He dreamed a dream, and behold, in verse 12, he said a ladder. And he said, now, behold, in verse 13, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac, of the land which thou liest to thee, and I will give it thee, and to thy seed. He haven't even yet received a wife yet. And this is where the Most High is. Now, we're going to skip forward a little bit. Now, and because of that, he called the place Bethel, okay, because he had an encounter with the Most High. And he came again, and now here we go to the main part. We're going to 29, chapter 29 of Genesis. We're going to try to keep that. Now, Jacob, he went to Laban, his mother's brother, okay? And what had happened was, this is what happened. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. In other words, he had to be a strong dude. In other words, Jacoby, Jacob, Israel, whoever you want to call him, was a strong dude. Now, and Jacob kissed Rachel. I mean, just out of the blue, just to kiss a woman because she's just pretty. I mean, in this day and time, you would go to jail. But anyway, and he lifted up his voice and wept. He might say, oh, she's so beautiful. But anyway, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. Apparently she was a young woman. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob's, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to the house and all these things. He was glad to see his kinfolk. Okay, now here we go. Now, and Laban said to Jacob, because they made a deal. He said, now I want Rachel, okay? He said, and it came to pass, he heard the tidings, and now Laban said unto him, surely thou art bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. In other words, you came from my sister. And he abode with him the space of a month. And Laban said to Jacob, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me what be that rages. Okay, here we go. Now he's going to take a wife. Now, would he go on? And Laban had 2 daughters, and the name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Okay, and Leah was tender-eyed, a little weak-eyed, you know what I mean. But I'm sure she was pretty also. And Rachel was beautiful. I mean, probably had those nice, whatever, however our standard of beauty is, she was beautiful. Now, and she was well favored. In other words, she had a unanimous thing that this child is beautiful. Okay, now, and Jacob loved Rachel. I mean, he was just one of those things at first sight. And he said to Laban, he said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, in verse 18, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, okay, it's better that I give her to thee, that I should give her to another man. I'd rather give it to a kinfolk than I give it to somebody else. Okay, and apparently Rachel liked the Kobe, Jacob. She liked him. I mean, and he was probably pleasant to her eyes and all that stuff. And so it was no problem. Okay. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days. But the fact is, here's the twist. Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And then Laban gave his daughter Leah. Why? Because it was customary that they should. He didn't tell him that, but he wanted to get rid of this woman. She's getting old. Let this woman get out of my house. Let this child get out of my house. She's got to go. So he said, Leah, you go in there and lay down, or you put on your veil so he won't know, because apparently they were both the same size, maybe the same build, but just looked a little different. And so she went in there and laid down, and really the consummation marriage is sex, copulation, whatever you want to call it. That is the consummation. It's not by the government. It's not by anything. It's about your family witnessing that you have copulated to a woman that they have allowed you to marry. They agreed upon you to copulate, and that is the marriage. See, some of you go by the state and all this other stuff. No. That wasn't even for thousands and thousands of years, billions of years, whatever they say, billions of years. The marriage certificate was never an issue, because there was no marriage certificate in that. And then if that was the case, he said, if you're going to divorce your wife, you need to give her a letter. That comes from the man, a letter of divorcement. If the wife wants to go away, he gives her a letter of divorcement. That came from the man. It didn't come from the government or anybody else. Now, and it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is it thou? I'm in verse 25. Did not I serve for Rachel? Thou hast beguiled me. Now, was that against the law of God? Was it against morality that he should marry 2 women? Now, what is, I would say these women that go about and say that they marry 2 men, trying to be rebellious and all this other stuff, the fact is, who's the father? That's one. Number 2, are these 2 men that way? Okay? While she's gone. Yeah, it's even written of Queen Nzinga. She liked men. She wanted this. She wanted that. And some of you want to be just like her. She had her little male entourage, or whatever she called it, trying to be like the man. But that only went so far with the Most High. Anyway. We will give these also for service which thou hast served thee yet. Now, these people were rich. Even his daughters had a woman that would serve her, Bilhah and Zilpah. I think that's Zilpah, yeah. Zilpah. Okay, now they had servants. And so Jacob fulfilled her week, and then he fulfilled a week again for Rachel. A week would mean 7 years, yes. And that was it. So therefore, even to this day, if you go into the book of the New Testament, which I don't read much, but the fact is that only time God tells you that you cannot have, or that passage that we deem as scripture says you cannot have more than one wife, is because what? Because of office, whether you're a bishop, a deacon, and so on. In other words, that's the only restriction to having more than one wife. Now, a pastor, you can have more than one wife, but a bishop, whatever that is, or a deacon, whatever that is something to me that was made up. But anyway, the fact is, God does not frown on polygamy. Neither does he frown on, but most of the men in the Bible, most of the men on Bible standards were mono. They was in mono. In other words, most of them only had one wife. Okay, one wife is all they had, but those who could would have two. Even some priests had more than one wife. So we cannot condemn what God has not condemned. Okay? And now with that, Jacob was a very studious man. Jacob would love both of his wives, but he loved Rachel more. And, for them to have children were the biggest thing for a woman in that day. In other words, Rachel, she had Bilhah, and here's Leah, the one that was ill-favored, so God favored her. He said, oh, you don't want Leah. See, God set all this stuff up. You don't want Leah. Leah was a pretty woman. Leah just didn't look what Rachel wanted. Okay? Now, so he blessed Leah's womb, and that she first bare to him Reuben. And then, next thing you know, she had a child. Yes. And then she had another child. And then she kept having children to the point where she stopped conceiving. Then she sit up there and gave her servant woman to her, just as her predecessor Sarah. She gave her servant woman to him for his wife. In other words, what are we saying? Marriage is not a business. No. It's a government. Marriage is a government. A woman cannot bear to two men at one time, but a man can impregnate many women at one time, or at one time within a time frame. So it's, even the animals teach us this. They don't even go to that point. So how are we to even think that this, whether you monogamy or polygamy, it doesn't matter. That is up to the women, and that's up to you, whom you marry. But the fact is, God tells us you must love your wife, and that's what he proved here. He had to love Rachel, and he had to love her sister Leah, all the same. So who won out? Leah. Yes, even Leah. Leah even birthed Judah. Come on now, because Leah was faithful to her husband. Leah was she was blessed, period. Plain old blessed. And with that, we're going to say peace.